Welcome to the Look Good Move Well podcast.
FBB banter. What are we gonna banter about, right, to get this thing going?
Okay, well, I'm really excited that a week from tomorrow, we, the three of us, Nate, you can't see, but he'll be there too, will be on a plane to Sweden.
That's right.
Heading to Aleko.
That's right. And
heading to the coaches conference.
That's right.
Yeah. So what are you excited about in Sweden?
Well, I just clicked the link to our hotel in Halmstad, and it is really cool.
Oh, yeah? We have one?
Yeah, we do. It's super cute. And it's like, very European, very like walk out onto the courtyard. Looks, I'm just pumped about being like in European culture.
Me too.
Yeah. And hopefully, I actually don't know like kind of the geography of the area and how the cities are laid out, but many European cities are like you walk everywhere. I just want to walk around and see stuff.
Walk around and look at stuff. That's the best.
Definitely. And Nate, I can't wait to see Nate in Europe. Nate
this in Europe will be hilarious.
This is the first. So
I can't wait to see all of us in Europe. He has a
passport, everybody. He's ready to go.
But like when you take a trip with people, you just get to know them in an entirely different way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Satya and I have taken a few trips together.
Traveled.
So, but you'll learn something different.
Oh yeah.
We haven't gone this far before. This is a trek.
This is a long one.
When Satya goes past the 6-hour flight mark, she just becomes a totally different beast.
True.
It's like,
it's like a Dr. Jekyll
we'll learn
situation.
about that. But I feel like I'm trained after last week, having gone with 2 kids through, 8.5 hours or 8 hours of flying time in a single day, with layover.
Yeah.
That's basically
that's a warm up.
Yeah, that was basically like, this is, if I can make it through this, then I can sit on a plane by myself for 12 hours. Like, that's no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot easier by yourself.
Changing a diaper at 10,000 feet in the air.
That's no good.
No bueno.
I've done that.
It's funny. This is a good story. Took my kid to the bathroom, who really had to go right before. You guys missed that, but Nate may or may not have just spilt about 10 ounces of water off the balcony here at the gym. Anyhow, the story is, Noah really had to go pee right before we landed. Picked her up. We the seatbelt sign was definitely already on. We should not have been walking the aisles, but she really had to go. She didn't understand, you stay in your seat right now. So we hustle down there. She goes pee. I'm opening up the door and I'm like, oh shit, there's my headphone plug jack, which Joey had borrowed 2 hours before that, and Megan had taken her to the bathroom and she had taken it in there and left it on the floor, and I'm like, good thing we came and did this, because it was my nice headphone jack is just sitting on the toilet. So yeah, that was the story. End of story. Okay. Moving on. Well, is there anything else you want to add to the excitement factor of this trip and what you're really looking forward to?
Well, I'm into so many things about the trip, but one thing that I've expressed to you all that I'll share with everyone is that I'm really into how stuff is made kind of things, especially around metalworking, because my father's actually a metal sculptor. So I grew up with him doing lathes and metal machinery stuff. And so I just am really excited about the Aleko factory tour, where you're going to engrave your own barbell, I think, or they're going to engrave a barbell for you. And I'd love to see how it all works.
Our buddy Ryan Fisher took a trip to Aleko headquarters 2 years ago. I remember when he was posting about it. He got to make his own barbell.
Make your own barbell? That sounds awesome.
I'm in this if Ryan's listening to this, he's not, but if he is, bro, I'm in a lifelong competition with you.
Yeah,
and because you did it, I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to ask them specifically, how can I do it one step better than Ryan
Fisher? Yeah. Yeah.
I love you, Ryan. Actually, we were just DMing yesterday. He put out a poll. Should I buy a house in Tahoe or in Hawaii? I was like, Tahoe, so you can be close and you could drive down here. We could work out, bro.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. What's the topic today, Satya? How would you like to introduce this?
The topic today is, let's talk RPE, rate of perceived exertion. and how to get the sweet spot where a lot of people approach RPE differently. I think there are a lot of questions about how to go hard enough. Am I going too hard? And I think that breaking down, especially the functional bodybuilding approach to RPE, how we think about RPE and how we use RPE in training, so that you know you're working hard enough to get the results that you want and you're not just phoning it in, but you're also staying clear of the zone where you're overdoing it and you're going to end up in a whole world of hurt.
You know what I love about this topic is that we've touched on it so many times in so many different ways with different language over the past 5 years that I am confident you could give this entire podcast by yourself.
But I won't.
Ready, set, go. Because Satya edits every piece of content that goes out and manages all the copy and listens to all the podcasts when she's on it or when she's not on it. And you have a very deep understanding of functional bodybuilding. And I am worried someday you might just be like, I could do all this without you. I got this. No. There's so many, like, this is definitely one of those podcasts that we're going to have transcribed, and then this is going to turn into a chapter of a book, because I'm not trying to oversell this episode before we get into it, but there's a lot to be unpacked here, and hopefully we can do this in the next 20 minutes. I'm caffeinated, ready, set, go.
Okay.
No, rate of perceived exertion, percentage effort, intensity, percentages of max lifts. Did I say reps in reserve? I may have said that. Nope. Repetitions in reserve. These are all ways of talking about the same concept, and it's an important concept. And this is why. You've heard of the saying, no pain, no gain. I say that, and I think that touches like a part of everybody where they're like, yeah, I understand that. Like, not like you have to go and like hurt yourself to see progress, but nothing is going to be easy. Nothing's going to be handed to you. You can't just show up at the gym, walk in the doors, and then magically like muscles start popping out of nowhere and fat just starts melting off your body.
That'd be great.
I mean, that'd be a primo membership. You have to get in and you have to do some work. You got to work hard, and so that's the no pain, no gain side of it. And then the other side of the coin is like, if you like crush yourself, you overdo it, you hurt yourself. A lot of people resonate with that too, or they've seen it done. They've seen people push. They know the concept of like, I was pushing the edge, I was pushing the limit, and I went too far. Whether that means like they were pushing the limit on the ski slopes and they like booted out and had a yard sale up on the slopes and they twisted their knee, or they were in the gym and they went a little too heavy and they tweaked something, or they were watching their favorite race car driver push the limit and they lost their traction and flew into the wall. Those are the ends of the spectrum. You got to work hard enough to get the results, but you can't work too hard because otherwise, or you can't push it too hard because otherwise you're gonna flirt with disaster. You're gonna flirt with risk, and so that is the principle that guides fitness improvement. Did you work hard enough, or did you work too hard? What's interesting is that coming out of the CrossFit space, which really got its accelerated start in about 2009, 2010, is that it was such a new phenomenon that we were seeing people very consistently overdo it. Like average people overdo it. The story before that was the average person doesn't work out hard enough.
Right.
They go to the gym and they just don't. They kind of phone it in. They think they're doing something. They're doing the lat pull down. They walk on the treadmill and they're like, why am I not losing weight?
Yeah.
It's like, because you gotta get some intensity. You gotta work harder. Okay, everyone walks in a CrossFit gym. This new elegant way of putting together exercises and doing burpees and moving for time, and intensity went from a 10 to 100 overnight. And people were they were getting their bells rung. And in a lot of instances, the bell got rung and they were working hard and they were seeing results. And also a lot of cases, it was like they were getting crushed and hurt
Yeah.
and burning out. So I was in that space for a bunch of years, and I was like, oh, I'm burned out, like I'm feeling it, and a lot of people are feeling it. So we started to kind of help people understand that percentage effort or rate of perceived exertion, we had to like dial them back.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also a huge audience of people out there where it's like, I'm sorry, we gotta dial you up. You're not really doing enough.
Yeah.
And this then leads to a conversation and a discussion of like, well, what's the right way to do it? How do I measure this? What's the best way to approach it? And I still think the vast majority of people don't work hard enough. We had insight into a small narrow group of people that were like the hard charging CrossFitters that wanted to compete and do the thing, and they were overdoing it. But by and large, most people are like, they haven't actually experienced pushing it super hard. And that's what I think the CrossFit experience was valuable for, was it's like, oh, I have not been working out hard at all. What the, like, I didn't even know this, I didn't know this level of discomfort in training existed. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean, the mistake was thinking that, okay, now I know what hard looks like I know what super hard looks like. That means I have to do it that way. Otherwise I'm not working out. Like that actually ended up not being true.
Right.
What it did was it just moved the goalpost really far to the right. It was like, whoa, this is super hard. Okay. But the sweet spot is not there. It's actually a little bit before that. And professional athletes in different sports have known this for years. Collegiate strength and conditioning coaches have known this for years, but that wasn't how the general population was getting introduced to intensity. They were getting introduced to intensity by like, these bone crushing CrossFit workouts that we were giving them. And they were like, whoa, they didn't understand what percentage effort is.
Yes. I really feel like a lot of people want some very definitive metric to go by. Like, if you get this specific weight and you do this specific amount of reps, then you are in the right zone. Or if you look at your heart rate monitor and mm-hmm. you're in the whatever range, then you're good to go. And I feel like there's a lack of emphasis on how to understand from a more feel-based approach.
Yeah.
And especially not necessarily even in that workout, but maybe you need to approach your workouts with a given level of intensity,
sure.
a given level of effort for a couple weeks, just like when you change up your macros and you need to see the effect on your body. It's not going to happen instantaneously.
Yeah, I mean, we all want that. We all want like what's the recipe that's going to work forever in every circumstance, and just tell me what that is and I can follow it.
Yeah.
A lot of people believe that if they have that, they'll follow it. The reality is that they don't follow it. It's hard to follow it even when you have the exact recipe. With training, it's hard to have that exact recipe, and here's why. When there are lots of variables to your training, then the definition of effort and percentage of effort really is a moving target depending on what you're doing that day. My former coach and a mentor of mine in the past kind of talked about like the more chaos that you have going on in the training, which is what he called what we were doing with CrossFit, mixed modal training. It was kind of chaos.
Yeah.
Like you can't measure heart rate for somebody doing a CrossFit Metcon. You can't. Like, no. You can measure it, but it doesn't really equate to anything that's
not
useful.
Yeah.
Like, and the example is I will do 20 burpees, 20 calories on the bike, 20 pull-ups. And if you look at my heart rate on each movement modality, it's going up and down. It's changing. So, but my perception of my effort might not be changing at all. Like, I'm like, the bike is the hardest part of this for me, but my heart rate's the lowest. And it's got a lot to do with body positioning, my specific, anatomy, my muscle endurance in different parts of my body. Just, there's lots of variables. Now, in a sport like cycling or running, distance running, or even powerlifting, where now it's not as much chaos, it's a lot more consistent stimulus, and there's one modality that you're using. the recipe for effort and perceived effort or percentage efforts becomes a lot more predictable and easy to script. So if you look at the endurance community, they have this down in a way that I wish I had 5 years of endurance background to go with my bodybuilding background, to go with my CrossFit background, because that is an area that there's a ton to learn about how to effectively use percentages to improve. And the example is that if you go and you get onto, and a lot of people have done this, they've done something called team in training. Team in training is a group of, it's a group of people that train for endurance events. And these are, competitive people, recreational people that could be runners. I think there's cycling groups, there's triathlon groups. You get into a group, you train together, you have a program, and it's to raise money for, I believe, leukemia, lymphoma. So it's for a good cause, but you take sort of people that have never done races before, never trained for a marathon or trained for a half marathon, and you put them in a program. And what they learn very quickly is that it's all about working on, your own ability and a percentage of that ability to get better. So they'll show up on the first day, and it's okay, you're going to run at this specific heart rate, and you're going to run for 20 minutes at this specific heart rate. And it's a very manageable heart rate. And for person number one, they might be walking or just doing the very slowest jog. And they're like, is this how fast I'm only supposed to go this fast? And they just do that consistently, week after week, week after week. And next thing you know, they're running 12 miles and they've never run a single mile in their life.
Right.
And it's the progression works when you stay to the script.
Yeah.
And so that percentage of effort that was prescribed was 60% for them, or it was a specific heart rate, and it was very well scripted, and they just followed the program, and it was great, and it worked. Now you can't do that for CrossFit or for functional bodybuilding or for, doing burpees and box jumps and kettlebell swings and then what about Olympic lifting? You can do it for that. It's not if you're doing Olympic lifting every minute on the minute or every minute on the minute with double unders or while you're, so it becomes very confusing. And that's where we have to teach our athletes more of a perception of effort rather than the actual physical number, like heart rate at this, respiration rate at this, weight percentages at this. Because those don't apply in the chaotic environment, which is doing many different types of training all within the same hour.
Yes. And it's important to underscore that rather than following specific instructions or perceived efforts based on the weight that you did last week or the weight you did yesterday, what we're trying to train is the ability to adapt to what's in front of you that day and how you're feeling in that moment. And so within a functional bodybuilding workout, for example, how would you advise someone who's not familiar with this to start refining that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I think what's important is that you become a really good note taker, or you record your results and progress from the beginning. This is the tip to somebody who's new to a training system that I think most skip. And why do they skip it? Because when you're new to something, if you start it and you just follow what's on the paper, generally you see results. It's the new the newbie gains that people talk about. When you first start weight training, you're not really talking about percentages. There's really not much needed to discuss because you can literally show up, do just about anything, and you're going to see progress. You're going to get stronger. You're going to see muscles coming out of nowhere. You're going to be like, oh, this is great. I didn't have to record a weight. I didn't have to think about anything. I just came in, lifted it, followed the sets and reps, and I got better. And then the 6-month mark comes around and you're like, man, I'm not seeing those results. I can't come in every week and just add 10 pounds. So you're like, what's wrong? Oh, it's the program. So you get to another program, but nothing changes because you're outside of this new window or this new athlete, new trainee, beginner window where anything can work. The few people that started with being measurable about what they're doing, they could start to see okay, now these are where my weights are. This is what I'm capable of doing. This is what I've done in the past. And now I need to start really focusing more on, what percentage of effort I'm giving. And they have reference points at this stage. Mm-hmm. If you start with no reference points, then it's going to be even more challenging to know what to do. So that's kind of tip number one. But getting to understand this concept of how much effort there is, you have to have a rubric that you're working off of what is easy, what is moderate, and what is hard. You could start there.
Yep.
Or you could do what a lot of people do, which is they create this scale of 0 to 10 and they define what these limits are. What is doing something that's 10 out of 10 feel like? Well, if you're just out there doing endurance running, then a 10 out of 10 might be running the timed mile, for the best time that you could possibly run it. The last 400 meters feels like your heart is about to burst and your lungs are burning and it's just gross. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's 10 out of 10, right? But if you're in the gym and you're doing functional bodybuilding or you're doing a training program in the gym, you want to assign a 10 for all the different things that you do.
Yeah.
What does it feel like to do a 10 out of 10 when you do back squats? What's it feel like to do a 10 out of 10 when you row and do burpees? And now this takes more time and it takes patience and it takes self-awareness and it takes being a decent record keeper and just kind of creating either mental notes or physical notes in a journal or on your training log in TrueCoach or something like that. And then being able to then look back and be like, okay, when I did, whatever weight, I did 95 pounds on that lift. It was a 8 out of 10 for me. Okay, great. Then next week I'm going to go up a little bit and because I know I can do that and I'm going to try and progress. And then finally it's being inside of a training system that has, has some form of progressive overload, which we've talked about here on the podcast. But progressive overload is, this notion of you have to push a little bit harder than you did last time in the gym to see adaptation. If you came in and did 95 pounds for 10 weeks, at some point 95 pounds stops being challenging and it becomes just a number that you can do in your sleep, and then you're not getting stronger. And actually, as time passes, you're going to end up getting weaker because you're just aging and you're not getting stimulus, and right. So we have to progress you in some way over a period of, let's say it's 6 to 12 weeks in order for you to see adaptations. And then we can change to a new training plan and do the same thing. We do new progressive overload cycles. So if you're trying to understand this concept of perceived exertion, then you should be in a training system that has that in a way built into the week after week after week protocol. That's why so many new lifters have so much success with a program called 5x5.
Yeah.
5x5 is a very straightforward powerlifting barbell strengthening program where week after week you're adding about 5 to 10 pounds to the bar, which could be anywhere from 5 to 2 to 10% of somebody's lift, and they just do it week after week after week, and you just accumulate volume and reps and progressive overload, and they start to learn because it starts you intentionally light. You say, oh, you're supposed to start with this weight. It's very manageable. The first week is I just did five sets of 5. That was no problem. Mm-hmm. Next week, still no problem. Third week, still no problem. It isn't until week 6 that you're oh, that was a little hard. But you just spent 5 weeks building up a foundation using 5 out of 10 effort. And then by week 6, it's 6 out of 10 effort. And then now you're creeping up. And by week 12 to 16, you've been training for 4 months and you're now getting to that point where you're hitting a 10 out of 10. And then you basically graduate to like the next program, which is like, you know, another periodization model that helps you to overcome some of these plateaus. So I think that gave us a few ways to start to understand and learn RPE. And you know, if you were in, let's say, functional bodybuilding persist program, then you would see that in week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of every training cycle, there are progressive overload concepts built into all the different portions of your training. So you ideally would see, okay, week 1 felt like this, week 2 feels like this, week 3 feels like this. And that's kind of where I'm, you know, learning and developing my own kind of rubric of what 10 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 feels like.
Yeah. I want to add a couple things to the mix. One is an emphasis on movement quality, because a lot of people do get hung up on numbers and they want the predictability of being able to choose the same weights and repeat that effort once you've like figured out that that's your weight for an 8 out of 10. You want to come in and do it the same way, but the tempo may be different. The rep range may be different. There may be a movement variation, especially in functional bodybuilding, that's going to give you a little bit of a different stimulus. And so getting more attached to movement quality, because this was one thing I learned when I was rehabbing an injury, is that you can take a lightweight or even body weight and make it really challenging if you really focus on quality and are really giving that your all. Not to say you're not going to need to add resistance to progress over time, but there's a lot to be said for doing a perfectly executed tempo at a moderate weight for a certain number of reps and the rest, and, you know, all of the different variables that go into it with FBB. And then the second thing is that we talked about this a little bit earlier this week on a call, but when you look at your general approach, just your blanket broad approach to effort, you're the kind of person that goes super hard, you're the kind of person that kind of phones it in. I think that just having a little bit of a discerning eye for, in, you know, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, do I feel like I'm getting better? Do I feel like I'm progressing in quality, in my capability, in my confidence in certain movements? Do I feel like I am giving enough effort to grow in the ways that I'm trying to grow, inside, outside, physically, you know, stability, anything that you're working on? Or did that level of effort start to cause a decline in your performance because you're starting to feel pain, burnout? I just can't muster the mental effort to like really take on this load. So those are just a couple of extra thoughts to add to the discussion.
Yeah. Well, additionally, I also will add a couple more things, which is, I think the goal each time you come into a training session should be to move with good quality. And it's like, make sure that you're not sacrificing quality for intensity. But that each time that you're in the gym, you got to pick something that you're going to give your effort on. You're going to really challenge yourself with. And a thoughtfully designed program should allow you to challenge yourself at least once, maybe multiple times in a session.
Yep.
Safely. And if I challenge myself this week and the program is thoughtfully designed, and I come in the next week and I challenge myself to the same number or percentage of effort, that I'm still making progress because of the way the reps, the sets, the rest periods were designed. So what that means, and what I'm trying to say, is that developing an understanding of your own rate of perceived exertion is super valuable, because you need to know that you check the box on that exertion level on any given day in the gym.
Yep.
I can take that even further and then assign a certain number of efforts that you should give on a week. You know, you're an intermediate athlete, you should give 8 efforts high 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 efforts a week. You're an advanced lifter. You should only do 4 10 out of 10 efforts a week. You're a beginner. Everything should feel hard. Like, it's okay. You're not going to burn yourself out. And why I'm saying it like that is because an advanced lifter, when they do 10 out of 10, because they've been training as long as they have, that 10 out of 10 is like a true 10 out of 10. And it's going to zap them of a lot of energy. So they might be able to do only 3 or 4 like that a week.
Yeah.
The rest is like your zone is 8 or 9 out of 10, and you get some good stimulus from that. An intermediate person can do more, because when they go 10 out of 10, they're still learning about they're still growing, they're still developing, they still haven't hit their true maxes, they still aren't pushing these, bigger weights yet. And so it doesn't take as much out of them. And then on the beginner side, it's like everything feels hard. It should feel hard. Yeah. And you wake up the next day ready to go, The other thing I was going to add is that rate of perceived exertion, that felt like a 8 out of 10. There's so much subjectivity to that.
Yes.
So when people are like, well, I don't even know what that means. So that's where something like reps in reserve is also a very good and interesting concept for people to learn. Hey, like, you stand up out of your last rep and you're about to re-rack the bar. And I say to you, hey, how many more reps could you do? You're like, oh, I could have done like 2 more. Like, okay, if you could do 2 more, then you're like at a 8 out of 10 right now.
Yeah.
If you like are standing up and your eyes like almost bust out of the socket and you barely lock out and you walk into the rack, I'm like, hey, could you have done another one? You're like, no way. Like, there's no way. Okay, that's a 10 out of 10.
Yep.
You're like, if somebody stands up and they look, you're the coach, you're like, I think they could have done 10 more. Like,
they're like
that's
walking
a
away
warm-up
with
set. That's a 5 out of 10. That wasn't the stimulus that we were looking for. It might have helped them learn motor control. It could have helped them learn, movement quality. They could have gotten a good, maybe mobility, strength, strength lengthening thing out of it. But did it get them stronger? Is that going to build muscle? No. It's not, like, in the traditional sense that we're talking about here. And that's where we just this was something that was really hard to coach in the group fitness days, is because you had so many people and it was like, oh my gosh, this person's working at a 6 out of 10. This person's they're at an 11 out of 10. Like, their form is breaking down. That's what 11 out of 10 looks like, is you've gone beyond your best effort with quality. That's another concept that I think people need to understand, is that you can push beyond 10 out of 10 and it looks like you doing something extremely sloppy and with bad technique in exchange for intensity, and that's where people get into trouble. Doing something 10 out of 10 should not increase your injury risk. It should potentially, and it could potentially lead to overtraining and burnout, because you're overloading your nervous system too many times a week. If you did every day going 10 out of 10 on everything, you'll get tired, you'll get burned out, you'll get nervous system exhausted. But if you do a 10 out of 10 squat with good form and good mechanics, you don't injure yourself. If you do an 11 out of 10, that's where injury happens, because 11 out of 10 by definition, my definition, just making this up today, I think this is a good one, is when you're pushing 10 out of 10 effort, but you break form to try and get them further, and that's where things go haywire for people.
Yes.
So, for people who are really averse to injury and they're like, they haven't dialed in their mechanics, they don't know how to move perfectly yet, then it's like, okay, find that 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 sweet spot, and you won't run into those, risky situations as much.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to give people just a little homework assignment.
Let's do it.
Like, make a little note after your training. Maybe what did you go 8 out of 10 on that day, or what was your rate of perceived exertion for certain things? Just mentally note.
Yeah, take a mental note. And this is what I voted for earlier this week. I said we need to talk to the people at the software app that we have our programs going out through, and next to your result there needs to be a little box where you can say this was an 8 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. Like, you can assign a RPE to it. That way you can know in the next week, what should I go with my training? How should I move? How should I up my weights?
How many times am I doing this per week?
Yeah.
Hitting an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. And and as you go through a training program, there's more 10 out of 10s towards the end of it, as you're getting closer to, the end of the training where you've built up the foundation, and you've kind of like the 5x5 example where it's like there were weeks at the beginning that were easy, and then there were more weeks that were moderate, and then there was a few weeks that were super tough, and then there was a couple weeks that were maximal, and that's how it should feel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we blitzed it. That was great.
Okay.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time. If you got questions, of course, slide into the DMs. This is a big topic, and we want to make sure that you understand it and you use it effectively to guide your fitness journey for a long time.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.